Fensel from Developer. I am a certified blockchain developer and certified cryptocurrency auditor. And today I wanted to bring you guys through kind of the basics of JavaScript. This is not by any means a full tutorial or a full explanation. It's just to kind of set you up with the basic terms and themes that you'll find within Java, and get you set up on the right track to be able to understand how to build a smart contract. So today I'm just going to go into Virtual Studio Code here. You don't have to have Virtual Studio Code. There's plenty of online options. Also, I want to apologize. I am still recovering from being sick, but I digress. Anyway, there's plenty of online options. I think Jupyter Notebooks actually has a browser version. I can double check that, but I downloaded Virtual Studio Code. If you're in a place where those resources aren't available, could also just be something that's copy and pasted. And I'll be able to put all this into a GitHub, which will be in the description of this video. So without much more, let's start off with the basics. And I think one thing people will find most applicable for here is just kind of understanding, how to include JavaScript inside of a page. Part of the basics of Java, if you want to incorporate it into a website, you're going to have to wrap it in what's called a script tag. So that's going to look something like this. It's going to say script, and you can write type, do an equal, text, JavaScript. And I need to end that there. And then you can put your code, let's say JS code goes here. So that would be a simple including JavaScript in an HTML page. With this input, the browser can actually identify and execute this code properly. Otherwise, it won't be able to. So let's say, for an example, you want to call an external JavaScript file. You can place a JavaScript in its own file and name it inside of your HTML. That we can keep all the different types of code separate from one another, making it better organized. And that would be, for this, you're going to use that same script function, and you're going to do src, which is here. And, we named this developer, all caps, .js. And we close that. Close that up here. And then it'll close that automatically. So that will essentially call that file name to it. So also, while we're kind of here and you're kind of seeing these slashes, let's talk about single line comments. To include a comment that is limited to a single line, precede it with the // So comments are important because they help people understand kind of what's going on in your code and remind you that if you forgot something yourself, keep in mind that they have to be marked properly so the browser doesn't try to execute them. So for an example, let's say I want to go back up here, and we just want to remember that this is to call an external JavaScript file. This won't be read by the code. This is great for organizing. I do this a lot with my contracts. I think it's a really nice way to keep something. Visually it kind of adds to the whole code itself, but it does not get read. So I think that's honestly, it's a great thing to have. So I mentioned something about single line comments. Let's talk about multi-line comments. In case you want to write a longer comment between several lines, you would wrap it in a / and a star at the beginning, and then you would type whatever it is. Michael Jackson there. And finish it with a star and another / to avoid it from being executed. You do not have to write he. That's just me feeling like I'm in a silly, goofy mood. So that's, especially if you're notating stuff, which I do a lot of that. just because you never know who's going to like look at your contract. If they're beginners, if they're super advanced, they might not actually understand your thought process. So I always think it's kind of nice to add comments. I also like will put in, if I'm auditing a contract, a smart contract, I will put in like a / like audited by, my name. And then I will include information like the audit date. And then I'll go down the list and add, but it does come in handy, and then you can kind of cite that. And a lot of people keep that within their source code after something's been audited, or at least the people I've met have, because then you can see who's audited it, so you can hold someone accountable, and usually it's going to be more than one person to audit. It lets you be held accountable, and that's just obviously a very specific example. So I will actually move away from that because really at the end of the day, it's just like a note. So let's talk about variables, because variables are incredibly important. It's going to be really hard for you to do anything without a variable in JavaScript. But they're basically stand-in values that let you perform operations. And you should be familiar with them from math class. If you're not, that's totally okay. So let's talk about like the 3 different possibilities for declaring a variable in JavaScript, each one with their own specialties. So let's write variables in JavaScript. See, we're applying our goods. So we're actually going to start here with var. And you see it comes up like that. But we're just going to write it for the sake of this as var. This is the most common variable. It can be reassigned, but only accessed within a function. Variables defined with var move to the top when the code is executed, and that is important to note. So I'm actually going to write that. Most common variable. No, we're not going to write that. Okay. So, and you're going to see this a lot. I use, var and constant and const and let a lot. So those are the 3 we're going to go over. So now next we have const. This is one that cannot be reassigned and is not accessible before they appear within the code. Oops. Then the last one is let, L-E-T. It's similar to const. The let variable can be reassigned but not redeclared. So those are the 3 most common variables within JavaScript. So kind of going on to the next thing here, variables can contain different types of value and data types. So we're going to talk about this as data types. You can use the equal sign to assign them. So let's talk an example. Let's say numbers. You would use var age 23 to assign a variable age for let's say just a regular variable. You would say var, and let's say for this, it's going to be A because my name's Anna, and why not? For text strings, and like you saw up here, similar, we write text. So we're going to say, text, and I'm just going to put in parentheses strings. This does not an actual code, just for the record. I'm actually going to separate this with a dash so you guys have a better delineation of what these are. And so something like that would be written like, let's say again, var A equals Anna. Ta-da! Another one would be like an operation. And we would write that as var A, let's say 1 plus 2 plus 3. True false statements. So you could write var, let's say it's a multiple choice. So like, let's say if it's C, it's true. There you go. You can do constant numbers. And that would be something like this. That would be something for pi, 3.14159. And last, I think, would be objects here. So objects, that would be like var name. And let's say we're, especially when we're talking about students, we use like a curly bracket. We do first name, Anna, last name, Ten Bensel. Perfect. And there's so many more possibilities, but just note that variables are case sensitive. That means like last name with a lowercase and last name with an uppercase will be handled as two different variables. So when you go through your code and you look up stuff and you're doing like your, 50,000th edit, just keep in mind that these do the uppercase and the lowercase, they do matter and they will be handled separately. Our computer is smart, but we have to tell it to be smart. So that will impact it. Well, since we're talking about objects, let's kind of go more in depth with that. So objects are certain kinds of variables. They're a variable that have their own values and methods. They're actions that you can perform on objects. So let's say I'll write out an example. Let's do objects. So let's say our variable is a person. And that person, equals. That person has a first name of Anna. Last name of Ten Bensel. Am I profiling myself? Maybe. Let's say my age is 25. And let's do something else. Well, we'll just leave it at that. Oh, my occupation. Blockchain developer. There. So this would be the object, which is like the objects are the kinds of variables. If that makes sense, I hope it does. And also, I realize I haven't explained brackets yet. So the curly brackets are essentially what sandwiches the information. But you'll see, the square brackets. There's a curly brackets and square brackets. The square brackets are called arrays. So arrays are a part of many different programming languages. Like there's, they're literally everywhere. You see them in Solidity, you see them in Rust, you see them everywhere. So they're kind of like a way of organizing variables and properties into groups. So like, let's say for an example, let's say we want to organize a group of like items, right? So for example, let's do fruits, right? What would be a fruit? Let's see. We have apples. Let's do a singular apple. We have peaches. Oops. And we have, let's do one more, banana. Okay. So we've created an array called fruit, which contains 3 items for future operations. So kind of going back to here, we could incorporate do a whole different set of things, and when do true if apple is selected, or not have someone's first name be Apple. Actually, there are people's first names who are Apple, which is fine. Not not me, but other people. So there's different, that's kind of how you would create an array. and how it would contain an item or multiple items. And so let's kind of go on maybe like array methods, because once you've created an array, there's a few different things you can do with them. So let's write array methods. We can do a concat, which would join several arrays into one. We could do an index of, and that would return the first position at which a given element appears on the screen, or appears on an array. I'll write that. It's kind of mad at me. My goodness. A join. Oh. Join. That would just combine elements of an array into a single string and return the string. Let me think. The last index of, which I probably should have put up here, gives the last position at which a given element appears in an array. So let me write that in. Let's see. One that I use a lot, especially when I like do Node.js or like a React, I use slice a lot. And that just basically pulls a copy of a portion of an array into a new array. Oh, that is security policy violation event. That is not slice. Oh gosh, sorry guys. Oh, good grief. Good grief. Let me write slice. No. Sometimes you have to fight with them a little bit. Okay. You'll just get the gist of that. Sorry, this is kind of going off. Whoops. You might hear that a little bit. So a slice, what I say, pulls a copy. Okay. Let's do pop next. Pop removes the last element from an array. A push would add a new element at the end. Think like a push notification. It's adding something to your screen. No, not a push manager. Don't be rude. A reverse, also that is not a capital. Do not make that a capital. Okay. A reverse basically sorts an element in descending order. And let's do shift next. Shift basically just removes the first element of an array. And I've done slice. Maybe we should do sort, because that also comes in super handy because it sorts the elements of the array alphabetically. Splice. Splice, I think, adds elements in a specific way, or in a specific position. Oh my gosh, I missed to string. You guys, I use that one way too much. Holy cow. To string converts an element, it converts elements into strings. And I actually use that a lot. Way more than I think I want to admit to. There's also an unshift, which will essentially add a new element to the beginning. And then the last one I can think of off the top of my head is value of. And that returns the primitive value of a specific object. Then I'm going to turn this off really quick. Okay. So those would just be like the basic array methods. Those are the ones I would say are really good jumping off points to start to understand. Like value of returns a value of a specific object. Like for an example, let's say your object is an apple, and the value of the apple is $1. It will return the value of, when you select an apple, the dollar value of it. So I guess it would be good now to kind of tell you guys about like the basic operators, and then we can kind of go into like comparison operators and logical operators. But if you have variables, you can use them to perform different kinds of operation. And to do that, you do need operators. Okay, so we're going to start with basic operators. And we can go through kind of like all of this in, what's it called? In the next video where we write our first JavaScript file. But these are just good to know. All of this is just good to know, but the operators are just good to know. You don't have to go into like complete strings of things. So you're going to have your usual plus sign, which is addition. Oh, not audio destination. You're going to have your minus, which is subtraction. You're going to have your star, which is multiplication. You're going to have your forward slash, and I want you to remember that there are two different slashes on here. There's a forward slash and a backslash. This is the forward slash. Forward slash is division. Division, parenthesis, dot, dot, dot. This, the parenthesis itself, not the dot, dot, dot per se, is a grouping operator. So within the brackets are executed earlier than those on the outside, just like it would be in math. So we're going to write grouping operator. And the percent sign would be the remainder. Plus plus is increment numbers. And I actually use this in the smart contract, writing your first smart contract video, because in the smart contract video, we write a smart contract that is a teacher grading students and having a grade book. And the student count starts at 0, so every student you add thereafter, it's incremental growth of numbers. Instead of having to write every like student's new number, this is a great way to write that. And then the same with the two dashes would be decrement numbers. So those are just basic operators. And let's get into comparison operators. You'll probably remember this when, less than, equal than, greater than. If you got to that in math, if you haven't, that is a-okay. We'll go through that here. So an equal is going to be equals 2. Equal is equal value and equal type. Now this is where it's not going to be like anything like math class, because like obviously one sign is usually just equal to, and then that would be it. So we're kind of having our own symbols within this. So if this is new to you, it's okay. Don't worry. We'll get there. We'll learn this together. An exclamation point and one equal sign is not equal. An exclamation point with 2 equal sign is similar to here, not equal in value, and not equal type. Yeah. Value and not equal type. So sometimes I get a little clumsy with my words and my hands, and I might have an extra equal sign in there, and that could throw everything off. So it really is important to check your code as you're writing, and like when you're learning, just be vigilant, because otherwise you're going to be staring at a screen of like 5,000 lines of code trying to find an extra period or a double equal sign that shouldn't be a double equal sign. Can you tell I have done this one too many times? All right, so this would be greater than, and then the opposite direction would be less than. That shouldn't be too uncommon for a lot of people. So we're going to start by adding the equal sign. This would be greater than or equal to. And the same going back the other direction. Oop, I did that as a less than or equal to. Last one is a question mark. Whoop. And that's a ternary operator. Okay, so now we have these comparison operators. Some of these should be new to you guys. Some of them are probably not new, but there's just good things to know. Oh, and while I'm here, let's do logical operators. That'd be something like and, which would be logical and. These, I call them stems. I don't actually remember what they're called, but this would be logical or. And the exclamation point would be logical not. And let me think. Oh, bitwise operators as well. Bitwise operators, where you would see just the single and. That would be an and statement. Write that statement. This would be the or statement. This would be a not. Ooh. Okay, don't write something else in there. There we go. Then we have a left shift. We have right shift. And then the triple would be 0, fill, right, shift. Okay. Now we can get into functions. Also use functions a lot. But JavaScript functions are essentially blocks of code that perform a certain task. So let's talk about a basic function. All right, function. So we would write this like function name, and then we would say, we'd give it parameters, right? Like let's call it P1 for parameter 1, P2 for parameter 2, and P3 for parameter 3. We then go through and add a curly bracket, and then we say, you don't have to do the slash. We say what the function does within these parameters. So what does this function do within these parameters? As you can see, it consists of the function keyword plus a name, the function's parameters, which are set in the brackets, and then you have curly brackets around what the function performs. You can create your own, but to make your life easier, there's also a ton of like default functions. So we can draw on those whenever we need them. So let's say a common application for a function is outputting data, or just the output of data. And so for output, you have to have one of the following functions usually. So let's do outputting data. Do something like alert, which would essentially output data in an alert box in like a browser window. Confirm, I'm sure you get that a lot, which basically opens up a yes or no dialogue and returns a true or false depending on the user's click. So confirm opens a yes, nah dialogue, and returns true, false. Let's say prompt, which basically is just, oh, there we go. It corrected me. Creates a dialogue for user input. Let's say document write, which will essentially write directly onto an HTML document. And yeah, I think that's, those are, I would say, were pretty solid for outputting data from a function. We can talk a little bit too about global function. So global functions are function built into every browser capable of running JavaScript. So we can just go through a couple of these. I don't use these a ton, but let's say we can use decode URI. There you go. And that essentially just decodes the uniform resource identifier, the URI created by the encoder URI or similar. So let's say decodes. I'm going to write it out so you guys have it. Resource. We could do an eval, which it literally evaluates a JavaScript code represented as a string. Yeah. I mean, encode URI does the opposite of decode URI. It just encodes URI into UTF-8. So I think those are just 3 global functions. There's a lot more like decode URI component. is finite, is nan, number, parse float, parse in. We don't really need to go over these for smart contract development. They're just good to know and good to have, especially if you're, someone like me and you like to try to do things that aren't within smart contracts, just to, broaden your horizon. So actually, let's talk about loops. I'm feeling like loops now because this just kind of we're kind of trying to get back on the smart contract thing. So loops are part of most programming languages. They basically allow you to execute blocks of code a desired number of times with different values. So one of the ones I use a lot of loops. I actually used to use a lot more when I made RPAs. So you have several parameters to create loops, but one of the most common is for. That's just to create a loop. The most common way to create a loop in JavaScript. I'm gonna write JS. While, it basically sets up the conditions under which a loop executes. A do while loop. This is one I used to love when I worked on RPAs. It's similar to the while loop, but it executes at least once and performs a check at the end to see if the condition is met to execute it again or not met. So I'm going to say executes. Oh my good grief. Can I? At least once, and performs a check at the end to see if the condition is met to execute again. We're getting E's all over the place today. A break. A break is essentially used to stop and exit the cycle once certain conditions are met. Or not met. Continue, skip parts of the cycle if certain conditions are met. Okay. Let's see. Let's go and, maybe talk about if-else statements, because I think that's also kind of on the same vein. These if-else statements are probably the easiest type of statement to understand. Using them, you can basically set conditions for when your code is executed. So if certain conditions apply, something is done. If not, something else will be executed. So I'm going to say if-else statements here. An example of it would be like if the condition is met, and then it would say what to do if the condition is met. Here, else, what to do if it is not met. So similar to the concept of this would be a switch statement, but the switch, you would need several blocks of code to execute this. So this is like way easier than that. But basically, if the condition is set, this is what it's going to do if it's met. And then if it's not met, this is what the task to do. I also used to use these a lot for RPAs. I don't use these for smart contracts at all, really. But when you are like working with RPAs, it's a lot of usually very repetitive, like mundane tasks, and it's about getting those tasks done. And this is great because if something doesn't meet what you need it to, you can just have it say like wasn't able to gather data or was unable to find X, Y, and Z. So let's actually, while we're here, let's talk about strings just very briefly, because we use those a lot too with smart contracts. So strings are what JavaScript calls to text that does not perform a function but can appear on screen. So if I wanted to write something like, you'll see in the smart contract, we tell that, we have a thing where your output, if you're a student and you try to change your own grade, it says you can't change this, only the class teacher has access. That would be a string that tells the person that they can't access this. So like if I wanted to say this person's name, let's say, for example, it's my name. Oops. It would come onto the screen as just my name. It would just say Anna Ten Bensel. And let's bump to string methods, because I also think that's important. Not hugely important for smart contracts, but just to know that there's like many different ways to work within a string. So string methods would be char at. Oh. Basically, this returns a character at a specified position inside of a string. Woo. Last index of, and I'm going to also say index of, so you can kind of see these together. Index of would, I guess I should have flipped these, but index of would provide a position of the first occurrence of a specified text within a string, and the last index of, it does the same thing, but the last occurrence, so it searches backwards. I'm just going to say searches backwards and forwards. Search would execute a search for matching text and return its position. Let's say concat, because I haven't used that one recently, but I do like it. It basically joins two or more strings into one. And then let me think. There's like a way to convert like two lowercase, and then the same with two uppercase. It just basically converts your strings to lowercase. And let's also say value of. And this will basically returns a primitive value that has no properties or methods of a string object. Okay. So now that we got those string methods out of the way, we can kind of talk here also about like regular expression syntax. Regular expressions are like search patterns used to match character combinations in strings. Like the search pattern can be used for text to replace operations. So instead of writing something like evaluate, here, let me write this out. Regular. If you guys can't tell, I'm doing this like live. E would be evaluate. Evaluate a replacement. I would be, I think, perform case sensitive matching. I think there's G, and that would be perform global matching. M is multiple line matching. S is basically to treat strings as a single line. X allows comments and white space in the pattern. And so let me think. U would be like ungreedy pattern. Okay. Feeling pretty good about that. Let's see. Oh, let's use this time to also talk about brackets. So we talked before about these. The array brackets. For this, let's say ABC. These brackets say find any of the characters between these brackets. Let's just say find what's between these brackets. And it's thinking it's a quote, but it's not. But we're going to just let it roll with it. Same kind of concept. If I do the up arrow, ABC, find what's not in the brackets. And you can put like words and stuff in there. And then let's do just the regular parentheses, A separated, B separated by C. That would essentially be find the alternatives separated with that bad boy, the stem, as I call it. So I think for right now, I want to leave you guys with this, because we can go into like pulling dates and time values and dealing with all of that, math methods. I will save that for another video. And like going over node properties, we don't have to do that right now because I think this kind of puts us on the right path for learning all about JavaScript and giving you guys a head start so you guys can jump back into the video with creating your first smart contract. I also am going to be putting out a video for the basics of C. I originally recorded some of these videos, but didn't realize that my mic wasn't plugged in. So I will get on those and finish those up, but I just wanted to share this with you guys now. I will go ahead and put this in, like I said, in my GitHub, and you guys can go ahead, use it, screenshot it, keep it, do whatever you want with it. Make your own video teaching other people how to use Java or teaching about the properties of Java. This isn't really how to use it. This is just like what it does. But I will see you guys in the next video where we will go a little bit more in depth on the basics of Java. Think of it as like Java Learning 2.0. But thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And I will see you guys next time.